World Sport, I'm Don Riddell, and this is CNN.
I'll see you Monday morning.
Happening now, breaking news, a new flashpoint in the war. The Kremlin accuses Ukraine of attacking a fuel depot inside of Russia and warns it could escalate the conflict. Are the Ukrainians responsible? We're going to tell you what the White House is saying and notably not saying about the strike tonight. Also breaking, thousands of Ukrainians just made the perilous escape from the southern city of Mariupol. CNN is on the scene for their emotional arrival. This as Red Cross teams trying to reach Mariupol say they can't get in to get more civilians out. Our correspondents are standing by there on the front lines of the war in Ukraine and getting new information from top officials here in Washington. We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room.
This is CNN Breaking News.
This hour, we're getting new reaction to what could be Ukraine's first attack on Russian soil since Kremlin troops invaded their country. CNN pressing Ukrainian and White House officials on the big question tonight: was Ukraine behind the strike on a Russian fuel depot? Christiane Amanpour is in Ukraine for us. She interviewed the foreign minister, and MJ Lee is over at the White House. She spoke to President Biden's top spokeswoman. We'll go to them in just moments. But first, CNN's Alex Marquardt has more on the depot attack and other breaking news.
With Ukrainian forces taking back territory, putting Russia on the back foot, questions tonight over whether they have gone on the offensive inside Russia. The Kremlin now accusing Ukrainian helicopters of striking a fuel depot just across the border in Russian territory. Moscow calling the alleged attack an escalation, while Ukraine is refusing to say whether they were involved.
I saw the video, but the quality is insufficient for me to identify whether it was Ukrainian helicopters or not.
The lack of denial, suspicious, but U.S. intelligence has long warned of potential so-called false flag operations by Russia to give them an excuse to escalate their offensive in Ukraine.
Let's be very clear. This could be a false flag operation on the part of Vladimir Putin. This is not beyond the type of operations that we've seen come out of Vladimir Putin in the past.
Despite Russian claims of shifting their focus to the eastern part of the country, northern Ukraine is still being targeted. Officials in the northern city of Chernihiv reporting new strikes on a hospital and a lack of daily essentials.
We have no electricity, no water. The Russian forces just shelled a local regional hospital.
But it is to the east, NATO officials believe, that Russia plans to step up their efforts.
What they call de-escalation, I call repositioning.
Thousands of civilians are still trying to flee the southern port city of Mariupol. The Russian shells and constant fighting making it near impossible for people to get out. Tonight, some buses managed to. CNN was there as they arrived in safer Zaporozhye. Big red crosses on the sides to indicate there are civilians. Wide smiles from those who managed to escape.
We still have 160,000 people in Mariupol that are not safe. And that's a real problem because all of these humanitarian corridors that Russia simulating, it's in general, it's fake.
While Ukraine fights for survival, President Volodymyr Zelensky says he has removed two top generals who he called anti-heroes, who, quote, have not decided where their homeland is.
I do not have time to deal with all the traitors, but gradually they will all be punished.
Alex Marquardt, CNN, at the State Department.
Alex, thank you very, very much. Let's go live to the Ukrainian capital right now. CNN's chief international anchor, Christiane Amanpour, is on the scene for us. Christiane, if Ukraine did in fact attack the Russian fuel depot, it would be a bold retaliatory strike. I know you spoke to the Ukrainian foreign minister today. What did he tell you?
Well, you know, Wolf, this would be a retaliatory strike if indeed the Ukrainians did it. I did speak to the foreign minister. You heard a little clip of my interview where he said, I've seen the video, but I can't really analyze it. Here's what he went further on to say.
I saw the video, but the quality is insufficient for me to identify whether it was Ukrainian helicopters or not. I'm Ukrainian. I have trust in the people of Ukraine and in our armed forces, and of course, as foreign minister, in our diplomacy. This is a war. They attacked us to destroy us. They reject our right to exist as a nation. So it means that we will be fighting back by all means available to us within existing law, international laws of warfare, of course, because we're a civilized nation, unlike them.
Wolf, it's really important. There are a lot of threads in what he said there. First of all, they're not confirming or denying because that's a matter of operational security. Second of all, he pretty much hinted that that perhaps they did do it because this is war, and in war these things happen. You remember exactly a week ago almost, the Russians actually sent a missile into a fuel depot in western Ukraine. The Ukrainian officers and the heads of this, resistance are basically saying we're not just here to be defensive, we're also going to fight back. And that's why you're seeing the Russian forces retreat a little bit from Kiev and reform and regroup and go elsewhere. He also said, the foreign minister, that we abide by the laws and norms of war. So attacking a fuel depot where nobody was injured or killed is far different than attacking Mariupol, where many, many people have been killed, civilians, men, women and children. So he's making it very clear that they are waging a war of self-defense according to the international laws of war, arrayed against a much stronger military, which is not following those rules. Back to you, Wolf.
Christian, is Ukraine now bracing for retaliation from Russia?
Well, I don't know. I can't imagine that this would cause retaliation. I think what this will do is continue and see the war from Russia just continue as it has been. This was an act of whoever did it. They're not telling us, but one assumes that it was Ukraine in the midst of a war in which Russia doesn't really need any excuses to retaliate anymore, doesn't need any false flags because it's in full war mode. And it is doing everything it possibly can because it has not been successful in its ground attacks. It's turned its attention to civilians, as we've been seeing, and that has been proceeding apace for practically the entire 36 days of this war. And also, they're regrouping potentially for the moment to narrow their focus on the Donbass region. We don't know what will happen as the weeks and months proceed, but for the moment, that seems to be what the analysts are saying and what we're seeing on the ground.
Christian Manpour is on the ground for us in Ukraine. Stay safe over there, Christian. Thank you very, very much. Now to the Biden administration's take on the fuel depot attack in Russia. Let's go to our White House correspondent, MJ Lee. MJ, I know you had a chance to ask White House officials about this attack. What are they saying?
Well, Wolf, first of all, the U.S. is currently not commenting on Russian claims that it was a Ukrainian airstrike that started this fire on Russian soil. And so the question that I posed to the White House tonight is what its position is on potential future strikes from Ukraine on Russian soil. Does it believe that Ukraine can sort of make its own decisions on whether such attacks might be justified, or would the U.S. Generally discourage from Ukraine from taking these kinds of actions, which would obviously escalate tensions? Here's what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki just told me.
This is a war of aggression by the Russian leadership, by President Putin, that has left millions of people displaced, homeless, has targeted civilians, hospitals, and other innocent people across Ukraine. We know who the aggressor is. That is President Putin and Russia. And beyond that, I don't have any comment on military tactics.
This, of course, comes, Wolf, as the U.S. has been saying recently that they believe Putin is being misinformed by his advisors, that he is self-isolated, that he might even be punishing some of his advisors. It's notable, though, Wolf, that the U.S. is clearly not wanting to comment on potential Ukrainian counterattacks on Russian soil. The U.S. has generally been pretty careful in not wanting to weigh in or take any actions that might be perceived by the Russians as being escalatory, Wolf.
On a separate matter, MJ, as you know, the unemployment rate dropping to a new pandemic low here in the United States, but there are still some very serious economic issues facing Americans, as we all know, including gas prices and inflation.
That's absolutely right, though President Biden understandably wanted to make sure that he took this opportunity to celebrate some of the positive headlines that we saw from today's jobs report. 431,000 jobs created in the month of March. The past 2 months, jobs reports were revised up by some 95,000 jobs. The unemployment rate now stands at 3.6%. What all of this means is that the jobs that were lost during the pandemic, most of them have been recovered. And that's why we heard the president saying today that the economy has gone from, quote, being on the mend to being on the move. But you are absolutely right that this administration still facing some very serious concerns, particularly when it comes to inflation, high gas prices. And even though wages are going up, that can in turn fuel the concerns about inflation continuing to be a serious problem for this administration. This is, of course, why we saw this week the administration announcing the release of up to 180 million barrels of extra oil. This is one of the actions that the administration is taking to try to drive some of the prices down. Of course, they know that there is no simple overnight fix for all of these concerns. Wolf.
I'm Jay Lee at the White House. Thanks very much. There's more breaking news just ahead. I'll ask the former Ukrainian prime minister if his country was behind that fuel depot strike on Russian soil. He's standing by to join us live. That's next. Also, we're going live to southern Ukraine for the latest on the safe arrival of an evacuation convoy from the devastated city of Mariupol.
There were 3 strikes that hit this facility. This is as close as you're going to get.
Just look at the utter destruction caused by this massive explosion.
Imagine the good fortune of the truck driver. He managed to survive.
More than a month into the war here in Ukraine, and the refugee crisis continues.
It is not even remotely close to being a ceasefire.
In Kiev, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, Lviv, this is CNN.
We all know that freedom is priceless, but a school for freedom is one hell of a deal. I'm Peggy Callahan. I am the co-founder and CEO of Voices for Freedom. Voices for Freedom is an anti-slavery organization. We are working in India, and we help people to freedom through a project called Schools for Freedom. It turns out that between 110 and 190 people can come to sustainable freedom over 3 years with their children being educated for a little less than $13,000 a year. In 2017, we took CNN to one of the villages we were working in Uttar Pradesh, India. And they got to see with their own eyes how the system works, how the schools work to help free people, what the conditions people are living in. They got to meet people and know them for themselves. And it really helped that they told this story. It has helped the organization explain it to lots of other people. And today, every single person they met in that village is free.
The world's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
We're following the breaking news on the Kremlin's claim that Ukraine was behind the attack on a fuel depot inside of Russia. Joining us now, the former Ukrainian Prime Minister, Arseny Yatsenyuk. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, for joining us. Based on the information you have, Prime Minister, was Ukraine behind this strike?
National Security Advisor neither confirmed nor denied this. But what can I confirm you right now is that as we speak, Russian military already launched a large-scale missile strike against Odessa, which is the south of Ukraine, and Dnipro, which is the east of Ukraine. Each of these cities is around more than 1 million of inhabitants. So Russian barbaric and Nazi-style military is striking missile strike against civilians and killing Ukrainians. So this is the reality. That's what I can confirm right now.
Some evacuees, as you know, Prime Minister, are getting out of Mariupol, but the Red Cross, the International Red Cross, said it was impossible to reach the city today. Is Russia refusing to respect these basic humanitarian corridors?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is another way how actually to make people suffer. Russia is telling that they are ready to provide humanitarian corridors, which is not true. They are constantly shelling these humanitarian corridors. And you know that Red Cross actually stopped this evacuation operation, and people, we have more than 100,000 people in Mariupol. Could you imagine, Wolf, that Ukrainian Health Ministry just provided the data? Russian military already shelled 274 hospitals in Ukraine. More than 70 ambulances have been shot. So this is a huge humanitarian disaster made by the Russian military and personally by President Putin.
As you may have heard, the Ukrainian foreign minister told CNN today that Putin may be becoming more realistic about this war, realizing he can't win, for example, in Kyiv, the capital, and now turning his attention to the eastern parts of Ukraine. What's your reaction to that assessment?
Well, here is the thing. His ultimate goal was, and will be to take over Ukraine. But he failed. He failed due to a very strong resolve of Ukrainian military and very strong unity of Ukraine and the Western world, and the sanctions that have been imposed by the United States and G7 and the European Union. So now, as far as I see, Putin switched to Plan B. My take is that this Plan B has a kind of deadline. The deadline is the 9th of May. The reason why, because you know that Soviets and Russians, they celebrate Victory Day on the 9th of May. Not like Victory in Europe Day on the 8th of May, but 9th of May is a big political holiday for the Russian Federation. And this is the bedrock of Putin's Nazi-style policy. Okay, that's weird to celebrate victory against Nazis with the Nazi approach and with the Nazi policy that have been implemented by Putin. So I believe that we are to face very complex and difficult months. He started to regroup his military, to redeploy his military. Ukrainian military already launched a counteroffensive in a number of areas, mainly in the suburbs of Kyiv. But what we see on the ground is that this kind of redeployment will maybe give him a chance to take over a small chunk of the territory in the east of Ukraine. But I want to be very clear. We will never give any inch of Ukrainian territory to this aggressor. And that's the reason why we ask you, I mean, the United States and the G7 and the entire free world, to help Ukraine to win this fight.
Thank you so much for joining us, the Ukrainian former Prime Minister Arseny Yatsenyuk. Appreciate it very much. We will stay in close touch with you. Coming up, a dangerous and very emotional journey as thousands of Ukrainian civilians escape the horrors in Mariupol. CNN was on the ground as the buses rolled in. You'll want to see them.
Gangwon province is located in the exact middle of the Korean peninsula. So it is divided into two parts, North Gangwon and South Gangwon. 2/3 of the Korean demilitarized zone is in Gangwon province. The Pyeongchang Peace Forum was designed to inherit the spirit of peace and harmony created through the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games and to discuss world peace in Gangwon province. It has created an atmosphere of peace and reconciliation on Korean peninsula. We will bring the legacy of the peace to the 2024 Gangwon Winter Youth Games. If the youth of the world came together, the breeze of the peace will once again blow on the Korean peninsula.
I'm Rafael Romo in Lviv, Ukraine. This is CNN.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me and Lenny Jokos as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections are revolutionizing commerce in Africa. This month, Connecting Africa through opportunity.
Africans are opening the doors more to other Africans on the business-to-business level.
Connecting Africa on CNN in association with Afreximbank.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 70,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Business is all about making connections. But some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN Partner Hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
I'm Patrick Ottman in Havana, Cuba, and this is CNN.
More now in the breaking news. Thousands and thousands of people fleeing the besieged Ukrainian city of Mariupol, which has been reduced to rubble by Russian strikes. CNN's senior international correspondent Ivan Watson was there as evacuees reached a safer haven.
The buses have finally arrived from the Russian-occupied city of Berdyansk. It's supposed to be a 2.5-hour drive, and We were told that they left around noon local time. It was around noon local time, and they've come in at just before 11 p.m. And these buses have red crosses on them, and there are dozens and dozens and dozens coming behind them, and they're pulling into this parking lot. It's all rather dark because the city's blacked out to protect it from the threat of airstrikes and so on, and people here are piled in and exhausted. This has been close to a 12-hour journey for people who were already trying to flee the besieged city of Mariupol. So people have already had to endure bombing and weeks without electricity and a connection to the outside world, cell phone signals, and they're finally here reaching a Ukrainian-controlled piece of territory, but it has been an incredible ordeal to try to help these people through. You can just see kind of exhaustion here. If you take a look at some of the faces of folks, these are people who didn't have cars to make their own escape. They were waiting for this kind of transport. Everybody has been forced to leave their homes. Many of the people who arrived earlier today with their own cars said that their homes were destroyed by Russian artillery, by Russian airstrikes. I saw people bruised and bashed up as a result of surviving explosions and blasts. There are estimated to be more than 100,000 civilians still in Mariupol. The International Committee of the Red Cross, they were trying to reach those people, and they publicly announced that their convoy, just kind of 5 vehicles or 3 vehicles, 9 people, were not allowed in to the city, and Russia controls the entrance because it encircles it with its troops. So here you have people coming in after just an incredibly long day, and what happens is they're brought in by Ukrainian police and then Ukrainian volunteers who register people, they check their documents, and then they're welcomed into a superstore that the city government and volunteers, they've organized medics, hot meals, clothes for free if they weren't able to get out with their clothes in time, and then further information about where to go from here with free transport, because then again, everybody, a lot of these people, this is all they have left, a bag, a suitcase perhaps, and if they're lucky, their family members with them. So this is a major evacuation. There are estimates of at least 2,000 people on some 52 buses that have finally made it through many, many Russian checkpoints to Ukrainian-controlled territory.
CNN's Ivan Watson on the scene for us. Ivan, thank you very, very much. Joining us now, Manuel Fontaine. He's the UNICEF Director of the Office of Emergency Programs. He's joining us from Vinnytsia in Ukraine. Thank you so much, Manuel, for joining us. Let me get your reaction to what we just heard from Ivan. It's very difficult to get aid into Mariupol and certainly to get people out. What worries you most about the humanitarian situation for the people who are trapped there?
Well, I mean, what worries us most is that we don't really know. We're not able to get in. We're not able to see the situation, but we know that people have been without running water. We know that people have been without food for a long time, or at least without regular supply of food. We know they've been without medical care in many ways. So we're very worried. But what we want to do is not only take the people out who want to go, but also being able to bring in the aid that is actually so much needed inside as well.
It's so important. You're there in Ukraine with UNICEF. You're trying to help people, especially children, flee the invasion. Tell us what you're seeing. How are your own operations being disrupted by the violence?
I mean, our operations are very complicated because, first of all, we have to do everything by road. We cannot fly planes to go faster and closer to where we need it. We have to cross line, and it's difficult. We just can't access most of the places. As I said, Mariupol is one of those where we want to bring in the supplies, but we can't. So it is complicated. It's long, it's tedious, and it's dangerous for the humanitarians in general, and it's even more dangerous for the civilians who are actually trapped.
The United Nations, as you well know, now says that the total number of refugees, Ukrainian refugees, who have left the country has surpassed 4 million people. How much worse could that number get if the Russian invasion continues?
Well, you've got to remember one thing is that there's indeed, for us, 2 million children who have actually left the country. But for those 2 million children who have left the country, there are 2.5 million who have been displaced within the country. So those children, those families actually moved and moved often towards the west, and of course are ready to cross over in case they feel that they are not safe. But those people are in need of a lot of assistance. Somehow we see more the refugees who are in neighboring countries, but we really need to also focus on the people who have actually moved within the country and those who are just unable to move. The humanitarian situation is even more dramatic inside the country.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. 4 million Ukrainians have been able to get out of the country, but another 6 million have been displaced from their homes, including millions of children. What about the long-term effects this is going to have on the children?
I mean, the effect will be long-term, in particular, if we're not able to stop the war, if we're not able to stop the violence. The longer you leave children in a violent environment, in a war environment, the more difficult it will be for them to recover. Now, there's ways we can help them, of course, and we're doing that. For example, we have teams in the subway of Kharkiv, for example, at the moment, trying to work with the families and children, just organize some routine activity to just let the time pass and just be helped. But it's not going to be enough if we don't rapidly stop the violence and the war, and if we're not able to actually reach the people. This is going to be a real long-term disaster.
It certainly already is a long-term disaster. Manuel Lafontaine of UNICEF, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for all that you and UNICEF are doing. We are appreciative, very grateful. And to our viewers, for information about how you can actually help humanitarian efforts in Ukraine, go to cnn.com/impact and help impact your world. The breaking news continues next. Millions of gallons of Russian fuel go up in flames, with the Kremlin claiming Ukraine was behind it.
Today, we live in an unpredictable environment, and news races around the world at breakneck speed.
Our engine continues, our impetus, our momentum.
My show brings you the latest news and top news makers. Give me the facts on voter fraud.
There has never been a moment where voter fraud has affected the outcome of an election.
And we also dive below the headlines to explore vital issues impacting our lives.
Normally this theatre would be filled with people and art and debate and energy. And so now we have to rely on the two of us.
How interesting is it to be Tyler Mitchell today? It's crucial we make sense of what's happening. There seems to be some confusion that maybe you can clear up. Where are the US forces in Syria going? And fully understand what's at stake.
What's happening now in the world is a great thing because people are talking about subjects they never did before.
Amanpour, weeknights on CNN. All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Two artists draw inspiration from their communities and their surroundings.
My production or my process has created a value chain within the community. It has created jobs.
African Voices Changemakers, only on CNN, in association with Glow.
We live in such a fast-paced world where the news has been so relentless. Historic events have happened one after the other. I think that you need that daily appointment with viewers around the world to try and sort through the news of the day. What's important? Why does it matter to me? How do I put it all in context? We follow the news as it happens and where it happens. And then we also take a step back to walk the viewer through the day's news. That is the mission of Hala Garani tonight.
Protein is great for building muscle, and it benefits your hair and nails too. But while meats are a great source of protein, research suggests that replacing red meat with plant protein could help you live longer. Beans and lentils can be a start. They're rich in plant protein plus fiber, B vitamins, iron, and folate. Most beans are also low in fat. Plant-based sources of protein also include nuts and seeds. Try stocking up on almonds, pistachios, cashews, and walnuts. Whole grains like oats, buckwheat, and brown rice are also good sources of protein. And you might assume that all fruits and vegetables contain less protein than other plant-based foods, but protein accounts for about a third of the calories in Brussels sprouts, broccoli, asparagus, and artichokes.
My name's Jim Brailsford, and I lead the Industry and Solutions Marketing team for Kinaxis. It's absolutely key that businesses incorporate sustainability into their business models. Firstly, you have got the corporate objective and being a good global citizen. You've also got the need to be reflecting that to your public, to your consumers, that show that you are actually being environmentally conscious. And also, as supply chains are more mature and are considering all of these things in a holistic way, it develops a sort of a steadiness to their operation. Supply chain sustainability will become a qualifier. It will not necessarily be the winner, but it will become a qualifier enabling you to participate in the competition.
More now in the breaking news. Russia accusing Ukraine of an airstrike on a fuel depot in Russian territory and warning it could escalate the war sparked by its own unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. Let's get some more with the retired U.S. Army Major General, CNN military analyst Spider Marks. General, thanks so much for joining us. How did this attack unfold, and why didn't the Russians, why weren't they able to deal with it if in fact these were Ukrainian helicopters coming in?
Yeah, let me walk you through a couple of things right here. Well, first of all, notice this morning at about 5:43 in the morning, this is a shot of where the attack took place. Let me move to the next full color, and you can see what happened. Now watch, and you can see the birds. Those are Hind helicopters, which are attack helicopters, Soviet-style helicopters, Russian-made, and you can see that those are the ones that released the ordnance. Here's a cell phone shot of the same thing. Again, the Hind making this entry. We call that nap of Earth, which means you follow the folds of the terrain. The reason the Russians probably did not detect it is that when you're at nap of Earth, it's very difficult. You can't get the radar into a position to pick it up. This also shows you what happened, the after effect of that kind of an attack.
Ukraine, as you know, the official statements from the government, they will neither confirm nor deny that this was a Ukrainian attack on these fuel depots. How significant would it be, though, if Ukraine did attack this target inside Russia?
Makes perfect sense that the Ukrainians would attack this target inside Russia. Let's again look at where the fuel depot is located. It's here in Belgorod, right here, which is obviously right across the border. And we saw early on in the war where Russians were staging their equipment, and in advance of putting ground troops into Ukraine, they were launching rocket and missile fires from this exact location. So it makes perfect sense for the Ukrainians, now that they have taken the offensive. They're pushing back on the Russians to take the fight into Russia and go after those targets. And the Russians have had so much difficulty with their logistics efforts, go after their fuel supplies, make it that much more difficult for the Russians to prosecute this movement.
President Zelensky, as you know, General, he says that Russia is preparing to launch more attacks, specifically says powerful strikes in the east and the south. What are you bracing for in this next phase, this new phase of the war?
Yeah, very, very, very difficult for the Ukrainians, primarily because this fight is not over. Even though the Ukrainians are having great success and they're pushing back on the Russians still have more equipment, more artillery, more rockets, more dumb weapons. And so what we see is, with the effort of the Ukrainians to push some of the Russian forces back, they will refit and could potentially move to this area to reinforce down here. What you want to do militarily is reinforce success. The Russians call what they've been doing in Mariupol, the siege on Mariupol, the destruction there, success. This is where they want to try to achieve some additional successes. And as you can see, the narrative that the Russians are having, the strategy is following the conditions on the ground. Generally, it's the other way around. The Russians realize they're not having success here, they're not having success here, so now they're backing up and they're saying, this eastern portion of Ukraine is where our emphasis is, and creating this land bridge really becomes the objective at this point.
All right, General Spider Marks, thank you very much for that explanation. Let's continue the conversation now with the former U.S. Secretary of Homeland Security, former General Counsel at the Department of Defense, Jeh Johnson. Mr. Secretary, thanks so much for joining us. What does it say to you about the war now that Ukraine would apparently be willing and able to attack Russia on its own soil?
First, Wolf, I actually have trouble referring to what's happening now in Ukraine as a war. This was an illegal, unprovoked invasion by one country into the sovereign territory of another, riddled by war crimes. Some would even argue that this gives war a bad name. Now, I thought General Mark's analysis of the strike on the fuel depot was interesting. I think it's a little too early to responsibly speculate about what this is. This could have been the Ukrainian military. It could have been some form of covert action by the Ukrainians that publicly they're not yet in a position to acknowledge. Could have been a false flag operation, as some are speculating. Could have been some rogue third group, for example. So at this stage, we just don't know exactly what this was. It would make a lot of sense for it to be the Ukrainians, but in this particular confrontation, it's difficult to speculate at this stage.
Is this, though, the kind of incident that demonstrates the potential risk of this war, and I know you don't want to call it a war, this Russian invasion of spilling over even outside of Ukraine's borders?
That is correct, yes. And there are all sorts of risk of it enlarging in some way, in some ways unintended. Could spill into NATO territory, for example. And that's obviously a great concern of the Biden administration and of Western Europe right now.
It certainly is. I know the Ukrainian foreign minister has told CNN today he doesn't believe the Russian forces are strong enough, his words, to sustain a three-front war in Ukraine. Do you think Putin would be willing to admit that and start to scale back his ambitions?
I don't think Vladimir Putin would be in a position, would admit that. It does seem, however, that assumptions and estimates about the strength of the Russian military have been vastly overestimated. It appears to be the Russian bear is overweight and untrained. What we see, in my judgment, seems to be a very haphazard effort at the invasion of Ukraine, where they're focused on one front 1 week and then focused on another front in another week. Many have drawn great significance from the fact that there's no battlefield commander in the territory of Ukraine running this effort by the Russian military. I think there might be something to that. Typically, in a confrontation like this, there is a battlefield commander responsible for the joint forces of the force that is in that country. That would be the traffic cop, so to speak. Here you don't have that. The effort by the Russians does seem to be very, very haphazard, very opportunistic, as if Vladimir Putin is flailing about, trying to get somewhere.
It's brutal what the Russians are doing, and very unimpressive militarily speaking as well. Jay Johnson, the former Secretary of Homeland Security, thanks as usual for joining us.
Thank you.
Coming up, the producer of the Academy Awards now speaking out about Will Smith's attack on Chris Rock and revealing how police were involved.
I'm Nick Watt in Los Angeles, and this is CNN.
On the next Vital Signs, we're exploring the future of medicine.
The work we are doing is joy.
With the team that brought us the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine.
The first subject was dosed in less than 3 months.
Could their groundbreaking mRNA technology also help treat cancer?
And get a sneak peek at what other innovations the future might hold, including lab-grown organs and AI-powered medical devices.
Vital Signs, this weekend on CNN.
The Royal Oak by Audemars Piguet was the world's first stainless steel luxury sports watch.
Famous watch designer Gerald Genta drew inspiration from a deep-sea diver's helmet, which had an octagonal shape as well as riveted screws around the design.
It sold for around $3,000 when it was first released in 1972. And you know, this was considered both by the industry and by the general watch buying public as just a piece of inexplicable insanity. You know, you just didn't charge that for a stainless steel watch. And not only did they not go out of business, it has gone on to become the single most important watch commercially and aesthetically for Audemars Piguet. They're avidly collected. Yeah, they are icons of modern watch design. It's gone on to become one of the most successful wristwatches of all time.
It really only takes a few moments to gain an appreciation of just how tough it is out here.
They've been coming across sniper fire, gunfire, mortar rounds. You can see really just how intense it is here.
I have to wrap it up right now. Quite anxious about spending too much time on scene.
Those are the kids really struggling to get away.
They feel like they won't be able to outrun the war.
They thought the whole border was open. People are just trying to bust through towards what they think is going to be a better life.
These nurses, these doctors really have nerves of steel. You can't help but be struck by how interconnected our world is.
Arwa Damon, CNN.
The journey to the top for a successful business in Africa starts with an idea. But how does a concept become a moneymaker? African and global industry leaders share their stories. On Profit Point in CNN Marketplace Africa, in association with Dangote.
There's new information tonight about Will Smith's Oscars outburst and Chris Rock's reaction to the slap that hijacked this show. CNN's Brian Todd is working all the latest developments for us. The ceremony's producer, Brian, is now speaking out.
That's right, Wolf. Will Packer says he was completely devastated in the moments right after the slap, and it took him a while to process it. And he has surprising revelations about the dynamics inside the theater right after the incident. Oscars producer Will Packer says when he saw Will Smith striding onto the stage, he thought it was a bit.
I figured, okay, you know, he's going to say something or come at him. Something funny is going to happen because that's the nature of Chris and that's the nature of Will.
But then...
That was a nice one. Okay. I'm out here. Richard. Oh, wow. Wow.
Then...
Keep my wife's
G.I. Jane のジョークだったんです。
I'm going to, okay?
Once I saw Will yelling at the stage with such vitriol, my heart dropped. And I just remember thinking, oh no, not like this. And Chris was keeping his head when everybody else was losing theirs.
But Packer told Good Morning America he still wasn't convinced of what had happened.
I said, did he really hit you? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah. He goes, I just took a punch from Muhammad Ali, as only Chris can. He was immediately, you know, in joke mode, but you could tell that he was very much still in shock.
Packer says the LAPD came to his office and wanted to talk to Rock. Chris Rock, he says, had the power at that moment to have Smith arrested.
And they were saying, this is Battery. We will go get him. We are prepared. We're prepared to get him right now. You can press charges. We can arrest him. As they were talking, Chris was, he was being very dismissive of those options. He was like, no, I'm fine. He was like, no. And even to the point where I said, Rock, let him finish. And they said, would you like us to take any action? And he said no.
The Academy says it asked Will Smith to leave the ceremony. One source telling CNN they firmly asked Smith's publicist, but that he refused. Some published accounts dispute the claim that Smith was asked to leave. Packer told ABC what another production team member told him.
That they were about to physically remove Will Smith. And I had not been a part of those conversations. And so I immediately went to the Academy leadership that was on site, and I said, Chris Rock doesn't want that.
Packer says he and other producers were hoping Will Smith would go on stage in his acceptance speech and make it better.
Art imitates life. I look like the crazy father, just like they said, but love will make you do crazy things.
But Smith wouldn't apologize to Rock for another 24 hours in a written statement.
Didn't nail it in terms of a conciliatory acceptance speech in that moment, who then continued to be in the room.
Will Packer says Will Smith apologized to him the next day. Packer says the energy in the room was amazing before the slap, and at that moment, it just sucked all the energy out of it. He says it was like someone poured concrete in the room. Packer says Chris Rock really saved the event, or at least what was left of it, with how he handled the incident. Wolf, that's a pretty consistent refrain.
Yep, good point. Brian Todd reporting for us. Thank you very much. Up next, the Attorney General of the United States, Merrick Garland, responds to questions about pressure to prosecute former President Trump and his allies.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson.
It all starts here. Changing, fighting, creating, connecting. That's why we're here. We live here, we work here, we're from here, and we'll go wherever the story takes us.
I'm Becky Anderson in Tehran. We are in Jerusalem.
Real news that shapes our world. Exploring not just what's going on, but why.
I just want to press you on one further point.
Getting perspective on this region from this region. Places that many of us know, but few of us get to see.
Observing countries on the move,
Still rooted in tradition. It all starts here, and that's why we're here, bringing you the world from our Middle Eastern hub.
Connect the world with Becky Anderson, Monday through Friday on CNN.
There were 3 strikes that hit this facility. This is as close as you're going to get.
Just look at the utter destruction caused by this massive explosion.
imagine the good fortune of the truck driver. He managed to survive.
More than a month into the war here in Ukraine, and the refugee crisis continues.
It is not even remotely close to being a ceasefire.
In Kiev, Kherson,
Zaporizhzhia,
Lviv, this is CNN.